I never thought I'd be the one sitting in my own living room questioning if my relationship was already over before the wedding even happened. But there I was, staring at Veronica across from me, trying to put into words the knot that had been twisting tighter in my chest for months. "Veronica," I said carefully, my voice already tight with nerves. "I'm not happy. We need to talk about what's happening with us." She didn't even flinch. Her eyes stayed locked on the Netflix show playing on the big screen. She had the remote balanced on her thigh, the glow of the TV flickering across her face. With an exaggerated sigh, she muttered, "What now? Did I forget to praise you for taking out the trash again?" The casual cruelty in her tone cut deeper than I expected. I clenched my hands together, trying to stay calm. "This is what I mean," I said, my words sharper now. The constant dismissal, the sarcasm, it feels like contempt. "When did you start hating me?" Finally, she paused the show and looked at me with that expression I'd grown to hate, half bored, half annoyed. Like I was interrupting her life with trivial nonsense. "I don't hate you," she said flatly. "I'm just tired of your neediness." That word neediness hit me like a sucker punch. Neediness? We used to spend hours talking late into the night, laughing until our stomachs hurt. She used to text me good morning and good night without fail. And now, because I wanted some attention, some connection, I was needy. I tried to breathe through the lump forming in my throat. "I'm telling you I'm unhappy, Veronica. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" She tilted her head back against the couch, rolling her eyes like I was a child throwing a tantrum. Then, with the faintest smirk curling at her lips, she said it. The sentence that would stick in my brain like a brand. "You'll never find anyone better than me, so maybe just deal with it." The audacity of it left me stunned. She said it so casually, like it was a fact, like she was reading it off a script she'd written for herself. For a second I wanted to argue, to tell her that wasn't true, that love was supposed to be mutual, not a game of endurance. But instead, I swallowed the words, nodded slowly, and whispered, "Probably not." She looked satisfied with that, as if my surrender proved her point. Then she pressed play on the show again, her attention gone as quickly as it had arrived. But in that silence, as the TV filled the room with noise, something shifted inside me. For the first time in years, I didn't believe her. And that quiet doubt that maybe I could find better was the beginning of the end. The days after that conversation stuck to me like glue. I replayed it in my head over and over. The way she didn't even pause her show until I practically begged for her attention. The smirk when she told me I'd never find better. And the worst part, the tiny flicker of satisfaction in her eyes when I muttered, "Probably not." I should have felt angry, should have shouted, walked out, done something. But instead, I felt empty. Like she'd managed to hollow me out, and all I had left was doubt and exhaustion. At work, my coworkers noticed. I'd sit at my desk, staring at my computer screen, fingers poised over the keyboard but not typing. "You good, man?" my friend Daniel asked one afternoon, leaning against my cubicle wall. "Yeah," I lied. "Just tired." He frowned, clearly not convinced. "You've been just tired for like 3 months. I forced a laugh, waved him off, and went back to pretending I was focused. But deep down I knew he was right. I wasn't just tired. I was drained. At home, Veronica acted like nothing was wrong. She'd breeze in after work, toss her purse on the counter, and ask what was for dinner like we were stuck in some routine sitcom. I brought up how I was feeling, she'd brush it off. "We're engaged," she'd say. "It's normal to feel stressed. You're overthinking everything." Overthinking. That was her favorite accusation. As if my unhappiness was just some imaginary monster I'd conjured up to ruin her fun. One night, I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in my hand, scrolling through old photos of us. Back when we used to go hiking on weekends. Back when she'd smile at me like I was the only person in the world. I stared at those pictures, trying to connect the dots between that girl and the woman who now barely looked up when I walked into a room. The more I tried to convince myself that things could go back, the more I realized they probably couldn't. We weren't two people drifting apart. We were two people on opposite escalators, moving in completely different directions. Still, I didn't want to give up without trying. So, I suggested counseling. I brought it up gently one evening while we were eating takeout in silence. "Veronica," I started, "what if we, or TRIED couples therapy? Just to work through some of this. She set down her chopsticks and looked at me like I'd suggested we join a cult. Therapy for what? 'Cause you're feeling needy again? My stomach dropped. It's not about being needy, I said quietly. It's about us. About saving what we have. She shook her head, snorting. You're ridiculous. I don't have time to sit in some office while a stranger tells us how to love each other. We're fine. You're just bored. And just like that, she ended the conversation. She picked up her chopsticks, resumed eating, and turned her attention to her phone. I sat there in silence, my appetite gone. Her words were played in my head. We're fine. You're just bored. But I knew better. We weren't fine, and I wasn't bored. I was breaking. After the therapy conversation, something in me shut down. I still went through the motions, still played the role of but emotionally. I started detaching. It wasn't even a conscious choice. It just happened. I stopped trying to initiate deep talks because what was the point? Every time I opened up, I was either mocked or dismissed. Instead, I kept my thoughts to myself. I smiled when expected. I kissed her cheek when she leaned in. But it was all autopilot. The funny thing about pulling back is people notice just not always the ones you want. At work, my boss commented on how focused I seemed lately. Whatever you're doing, keep it up, he said. You're sharper than I've seen in months. Meanwhile, at home, Veronica started complaining. You're so quiet, she'd pout, scrolling on her phone. You don't talk to me anymore. I wanted to laugh at the irony. Now she noticed my silence. When I'd been screaming emotionally for months and she hadn't cared, but instead of lashing out, I just nodded. I guess I'm tired. Her complaints didn't last long anyway. She was too busy planning brunches with her friends, obsessing over her Pilates schedule, scrolling Instagram for wedding inspiration she never actually shared with me. Our wedding was still 6 months away, but I felt like a guest in the planning process. Then came the engagement party her parents threw. It was supposed to be a celebration, but the whole night felt like a performance. Veronica was radiant, charming everyone, clinging to my arm when it made her look good, then drifting away the second she spotted someone more interesting. I spent most of the evening listening to her aunts tell me how lucky I was to have landed someone like Veronica. One even patted my arm and whispered, she could have done better, you know? So make sure you treat her right. I smiled politely, but inside something snapped. That narrative, me as the lucky one, Veronica as the prize, was exhausting. Did no one see how lopsided this was? The car ride home was silent until Veronica finally spoke. You were kind of dull tonight, she said casually, adjusting her lipstick in the visor mirror. You should have mingled more. I thought I did fine, I muttered. She shrugged, snapping the visor shut. Just don't make people think you're boring. You don't want them questioning why I'm marrying you. I didn't respond. Because in that moment, I realized she already was. She was questioning it, whether she admitted it or not. That night, lying in bed next to her while she scrolled her phone, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself the question I'd been avoiding. Do I even want to marry her anymore? The honest answer. I wasn't sure. Once that doubt crept in, it refused to leave. Over the next few weeks, the distance between us grew louder than any argument could have. I wasn't picking fights. I wasn't begging for attention. I was simply there, present in body, absent in spirit. And strangely, that seemed to bother Veronica more than my earlier attempts to connect ever had. You're different, she said one evening, watching me while I absent-mindedly scrolled through work emails. You don't look at me the same. I raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? It means, she sighed dramatically, that you're cold, distant, like you don't even care anymore. I wanted to laugh now she cared, now that I wasn't chasing her approval like a dog. Instead, I kept my tone even. I've just been thinking a lot. She folded her arms. Thinking about what? About us? That was enough to make her roll her eyes. God, here we go again. You're obsessed with dissecting our relationship. Can't you just be happy? Other guys would kill to be in your position. The arrogance in her voice was breathtaking. I stared at her, wondering if she truly believed she was irreplaceable. Maybe I'm not like other guys, I said quietly. She scoffed, clearly uninterested in digging deeper. You're being dramatic again. Then she went back to her phone. Conversation over. But the seed had been planted. I started imagining my life without her. The freedom, the peace, the possibility of finding someone who actually respected me. At first, it scared me. Then, slowly, it excited me. The real turning point came at dinner with Daniel and his wife Leah. They'd invited us to their favorite little Italian spot, cozy and warm, with candles on every table. From the moment we sat down, Veronica was restless. She interrupted me constantly, made snide jokes about my work stories, and at one point even cut me off mid-sentence to tell Leah how pathetic I looked when I tried to fix our sink. Daniel and Leah laughed awkwardly, glancing at me with sympathy. I forced a smile, but inside, my blood boiled. When Veronica excused herself to the restroom, Daniel leaned across the table. "Man, I've got to ask, are you okay? Because she—" I hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "She doesn't seem to respect you." Leah nodded in agreement. "Honestly, it's painful to watch. You deserve better." Their words hit me hard, not because they were new thoughts, but because hearing them out loud spoken by friends who cared about me made them undeniable. By the time Veronica returned, laughing into her phone about some inside joke with her friends, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to keep living like this. I didn't know exactly how or when, but I knew something had to give. And as fate would have it, the breaking point came sooner than I expected, 6 weeks later, at Veronica's favorite restaurant. 6 weeks later, Veronica suggested dinner at her favorite restaurant. A trendy upscale spot downtown where the waiters all wore suits, and the wine list was longer than the menu. I knew the place meant a lot to her. It was where she went for birthdays, girls' nights, and whenever she wanted to post pictures that screamed luxury. I agreed without hesitation. By then, I'd already made peace with my decision. I wasn't staying in this relationship. I was just waiting for the right moment to show her that I'd stopped believing her narrative. And somehow dinner at her temple of self-image felt like poetic justice. We arrived dressed to impress. Veronica wore a black dress that clung to her figure, paired with diamond earrings she'd begged me to buy last Christmas. She looked stunning, as always, and she knew it. As we walked in, I caught her straightening her posture, scanning the room for familiar faces. This wasn't dinner, it was a stage. The first half of the meal was typical Veronica. She ordered the most expensive wine, snapped photos of the table setting, and made little digs at me under her breath. "Don't embarrass yourself trying to pronounce the specials," she whispered with a smirk when the waiter recited them. I didn't bite. Stayed calm, polite, even charming. I laughed when she expected me to sulk. I toasted her when the wine arrived. But inside, I was stone cold, detached. Halfway through the meal, it happened. Veronica's favorite couple from her social circle walked in, Madison and Cole. They were the Instagram-perfect type. Wealthy, attractive, always posting vacation photos. Veronica's eyes lit up like she'd just spotted royalty. "Cole, Maddie," she squealed, waving them over. Within seconds, they joined our table, and Veronica shifted into her best performance mode. She bragged about our engagement, our perfect plans, and then, because she couldn't resist, she started poking fun at me again. "You should have seen him last week," she told them, laughing loudly, trying to fix the leaky faucet. He had YouTube videos pulled up like he was some kind of plumber. Water everywhere. It was pathetic. They chuckled politely, clearly uncomfortable, but Veronica kept going. "Honestly, sometimes I feel like I'm babysitting. But hey, at least he's trying, right?" I set my fork down, wiped my mouth with the napkin, and looked her dead in the eye. My voice was calm, steady, almost too quiet for the table. "You're right, Veronica. You said I'd never find anyone better than you. Probably not." Her smirk widened until I continued. "But the thing is, I don't need better. I just need different. Someone who respects me, and that's not you." The table went silent. Madison and Cole exchanged wide-eyed glances. Veronica froze, her face draining of color. Then, without another word, I stood, placed my share of the bill on the table, and walked out. Behind me, I heard Veronica's chair screech back and her voice crack, calling my name. But I didn't turn around. Because for the first time in years, I felt free. I didn't look back when I left the restaurant. The cool night air hit me like a wave, clearing the fog that had been sitting in my head for months. My hands were steady, my breathing calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't second-guessing myself. I walked 2 blocks to the parking garage, unlocked my car, and sat behind the wheel. My phone buzzed almost immediately. First a call, then another. Then texts rapid fire, frantic, all from Veronica. "Where are you? Come back right now. We need to talk. You're overreacting. If you leave like this, we're done." I watched the messages stack up without replying. By the time I drove out of the garage, she'd left 6 voicemails. Her voice went from angry to panicked to sobbing. I didn't need to hear every word to know the pattern. This was her control slipping through her fingers. And she didn't know how to stop it. That night, I stayed at Daniel's place. He opened the door, took one look at me and said, "So, finally happened?" "Yeah," I said simply. He clapped me on the shoulder and handed me a beer. We sat on his balcony in silence for a while. The city lights stretched out in front of us, and for once, I didn't feel trapped. I felt like I had options. The next morning, Veronica showed up at my apartment. I didn't answer the door, but I could hear her through the walls. She was crying, begging, alternating between apologies and insults. "You're throwing everything away over one bad night. You'll regret this. No one else will put up with you." I didn't mean it. I was just joking. "Please, let's talk." Her words were desperate, but they didn't hit me like they used to. They didn't sink in and make me question myself. It just sounded hollow. I'd already packed a bag, grabbed the essentials, and made arrangements to crash at Daniel's until I found my own place. As I locked the door behind me, I slid the engagement ring, hers, not mine, into an envelope and left it on the counter. No note, no explanation, just closure. 2 weeks later, mutual friends told me Veronica had a meltdown at that same restaurant. Apparently she went back, alone, and saw me there. Not with her, but with someone new. It wasn't a date, not really. Just a coworker I'd invited out for dinner. But from what I heard, the sight of me laughing, relaxed, unbothered, it broke her. She stormed out before the appetizers even arrived, tears streaming down her face. And me, I didn't chase after her. I didn't even feel guilty. Because she was right about one thing. Maybe I'll never find better than her. But I don't need better. I just need peace. I need respect. And I'd rather be alone than settle for someone who thinks I should feel lucky to be treated like less. For the first time in years, I finally believe I deserve more. If you made it this far, go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.